Most reporters remember their first big assignment. For Sanjay Gupta, it's kind of hard to forget.
This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot.
Sanjay started in the CNN newsroom just weeks before 9/11, and he got his first taste of reporting at Ground Zero. Since then, he's gone on to become a star of CNN. And here's the thing, he's not just a reporter, he is also a doctor, a neurosurgeon to be exact.
The brain, unlike other organs in the body, if it starts to swell, it's really got nowhere to go.
And if you think that's impressive, wait till you hear about his mom. Sanjay grew up in Detroit. The Guptas were the only Indian family in town. He got into med school at 16, just like Doogie Howser. Whoa. But Doogie was a doctor for pretends. Sanjay's the real deal. After 10 years of operating on people's spines and brains, he took a fellowship in the White House where he wrote speeches for Hillary Clinton. And today, he seesaws between the role of doctor and reporter. Sometimes he's both at the same time. You know, back in 2003, he embedded with the U.S. Navy medical unit in Iraq, where he filed stories and performed brain surgery. He did the same thing in Haiti, and it has led to some criticism. Is it okay for journalists to become participants in their stories? Can that cloud the reporting? And medical reporters like Sanjay have been subjected to further criticism about their ability to stay objective on TV networks sponsored by Big Pharma.
That report was so biased. I can't imagine what pharmaceutical company ads coming up right after our break here.
Now CNN's chief medical correspondent has written his first novel. It's called Monday Mornings, a behind-the-scenes look at what really goes on inside a hospital.
Please welcome to the show, Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
This is really cool. I mean, the subject matter is interesting because it's very serious, but you've actually found a way to make fiction out of some pretty serious moments as well.
Yeah, you know, I think we take people into a place in a hospital where they've never been. I think most people didn't even know that a meeting exists where doctors openly discuss mistakes that have happened in hospitals. And you know, I've attended these meetings for almost 20 years, and you know, George, they're some of the most indelible experiences for me. They stick with you, and you know, there's a lot to the stories. You know, if something happens, you wonder, well, what did the doctor learn from that? What did the hospital learn from that? How did it affect the patient ultimately? So
it's every Monday morning. Is Monday mornings?
Well, so Monday mornings, you know, they can occur at different times. I played with the title a lot. What I really wanted to convey was that, you know, when a mistake happens, it's not necessarily the end, it can be the beginning. And I wanted the title to sort of reflect that. And also, you know, to sort of think, you know, this whole idea of Monday morning quarterbacking, you know, where you get to reflect and think, okay, what did we do wrong? How do we not do that mistake again? How do we get better? So that was the feel.
Well, it's just a nice name for a title, but in the hospitals, what were those called? Were they called morbid and mortality?
They're called morbidity and mortality, or death and complications. And you know, those are tough titles. You know, so.
And it's not gallows humor. It's like real stuff, right?
It is the spectrum, I'll tell you, George. I mean, you know, literally, so you might imagine people are sitting there and they don't always know who's going to be called. And you have a chairman who is sort of running the whole department in the meeting who says, you know, George, why don't you come up here and tell us about what happened with so-and-so? And you literally get up there in front of your colleagues and start to give the story. Some people are, you know, they're more quick to deny or to blame somebody else. Some people are surgical showmen, you know, wielding, you know, as you say, gallows or black humor. Other people completely break down as a result of what happens there. So it can be funny at times, you know, obviously in the less serious situations, but also very, very poignant as well.
This, you know, even the Walrus, the cover, why 24,000 Canadians will die this year because of medical error. That's a lot of people for error.
And in the States, in 1999, there was a report that said it was probably around 98,000 people would die because of medical errors. And 13 years later now, the number probably hasn't gone down. Right. It's probably, you know, as high, if not higher.
Is there just no way to make it better?
I think there is, and I think that this is part of what I wanted to get. Even though it's a fiction book, I wanted to get at this point that we know ways to make it better. There are things that are being done in hospitals right now that can make it better, but it's not implemented. It requires a culture change, I think, and it requires it from, you know, the grassroots. Everyone has to buy into this idea that, you know, these simple changes can work. Hand washing, to checklists in operating rooms, things like that.
What's interesting is that you're in such a bizarre position because you are a surgeon, you are a practicing doctor, you go to these meetings, but you've become this other guy too. Right. You're the guy that we know, which is the guy they see on television. Right. And television can distort a profession, you know. Have you experienced that? I mean, what's that just been like? Because
you know, I think that I've been lucky in some ways. I think I came to journalism later in life. I'm a doctor. I remained a doctor. I'm a doctor first, as I say, and I think as a result, I think there's a lot of commonalities. If you lose your credibility in either journalism or in medicine, you've lost everything, really. So that was something that was ingrained in me from the start. But also, I think, at the end of the day, I see what I do on television as sort of an extension of taking care of patients. A lot of what we do as doctors is simply to educate patients. Right. They want to be educated. They want to, better understand a disease or what's happening with them. And I do that to some extent on television. It's much broader, not as in depth, but, it can have the same impact.
Have you had any situation where you're walking into an operating room and somebody looks and goes, holy shit, it's the guy from TV?
You sort of get three types of people, I find. You get a group of people who are sort of like, hey, you're that guy from television. If you do me a favor, don't think about anything between now and the time you operate on my brain tumor, but my brain tumor. No television or anything. You get the other people who think that you're actually better in some way because you're on TV, which is not true. It's not to say that I'm bad by any means, but it's not that you're necessarily better. So it just varies in terms of people's perceptions. A lot of people just don't put it together. They don't connect it.
They've got other things going on in their lives.
They understandably are more concerned about what's happening with them.
Well, what we saw though, we saw with the economy when it collapsed that there was a lot of the kind of entertainment conversation about the stock market. Jim Cramer experienced it too. These kind of bull market guys. And when things started to collapse, he went, oh, you guys were championing this kind of cowboy attitude. Right. In the medical community, what you're seeing a lot of is, and I'm sure you've experienced it on your show as well, with segments sponsored by Big Pharma and things like that. It's this idea of how do you hang on to the integrity of this amidst the sea of whatever?
There's a disconnect on several levels. That's one of them, where, there is these seemingly external pressures which are forcing the more fluffy sort of stories or the sensationalization of stories that would otherwise just be good news stories. But there's also, and I'm sure you experience it as well, is this idea that what people say they want to watch versus what they actually watch are two different things. And as a scientist, someone who comes to this from the background of science, that was a difficult thing for me to get my arms around. I love data. I love to be able to look at things and then try and make some social sort of, conclusions based on that data. People say, look, I was covering wars in the Middle East. I was down in Haiti covering the earthquake. But the people say we want those stories. We want to be more engaged global citizens. But the ratings just, they don't reflect that. After Haiti, for a couple of days, people watched. We were down there for almost a month, and they just dwindle off. So it's tough. I think, you have to have the courage to just keep doing the stories that you think are important.
I know, most people who do what we do for a living don't have the opportunity to tell the network who can and cannot sponsor. But as a doctor, have you ever said to them, I can't have this sponsor working on this particular part of our show?
It hasn't really come up. I hardly ever know who the sponsors are. When we're doing a show, for example, even if it's live, during the commercial breaks, all we see is black on the monitor. We don't even see the commercial, so I don't even know. I leave it up to the, I don't think about the sponsors, I don't know who they are. I leave it up to the editors to say, look, if we're doing a story on such and such drug by chance, and there happens to be a pharmaceutical ad around it, that they can deal with that sort of stuff. But luckily, the true separation of church and state, at least as a reporter, that's true for me. I don't have to think about it.
I was thinking about, you mentioned the idea of science. You grew up with Hindu parents, right?
Yeah.
What was that? I grew up in a religious home as well, but I'm not a scientist. When do you start to have that, that voice gets louder and louder in your head with religion versus science? Well,
my parents are both engineers, and they grew up Hindu.
Wasn't your mother like a groundbreaking engineer?
My mom was, she was. Thanks for mentioning that, because we're very proud of my mom and my family. But she was the first woman ever hired as an engineer by the Ford Motor Company. And the Ford Motor Company at that time, in the mid-'60s, was one of the most progressive in the auto industry. So she's likely the first woman hired as an engineer in the automotive field in the States. And, she was a woman from India. She wore a sari in the mid-'60s in Michigan. They don't wear saris nowadays. So, and she, her name is Damayanti, which is a long name. And people would always say, shorten your name. Who's going to remember, Damayanti? And she's like, well, that's my name. That's what I'm going to be called. So, at the time, growing up in a very homogenous town in Michigan, sometimes, you got teased as a kid because of the color of your skin, your name, all that sort of stuff. And that's hard as a kid, but now I so appreciate what my mom was able to endure and get through, and we're so proud of her. So she was groundbreaking. She remains groundbreaking. She's going to watch this show, and she's going to be so happy that you asked about her. So, but yeah, so they were both engineers. So they really blended, I think, science and faith. Leaving aside the specific tenets of the Hindu religion, this idea that faith, my parents would tell me, for the sake of faith, regardless of what you believe in something, was I think a message that was, given to me and my brother. So, yeah, it was very easy, I think, to have scientific endeavors, but to also want to be a writer, to study philosophy. It was very embracing, very welcoming.
I'm glad you mentioned your brother. You're going to see more of this. Stick around, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, right through.
I am incredibly fortunate to have my mother in the audience today. She grew up in a tiny village in India, and at a time when the career potential for a woman was pretty much non-existent. But she decided that wasn't good enough for her. She decided that her dreams were not to be contained, and went on to become Ford Motor Company's first ever female engineer. Now, I know I don't tell her this enough, but she means everything to me.
That's pretty great, man. That's my little brother. Yeah, that's Sunil, right?
That's Sunil. He was giving commencement at the Northwestern Law School there, and you get the sense of just how much of an impact she had on us.
And that was, what, 4 years ago? Your brother was, what, 28 at the time?
Yeah, exactly. He's 10 years younger than I am. Yeah.
That's incredible, man. Growing up in that town and being, a person of color, how did that shape you?
Kids can be tough on each other, so I think, and more so for me because I was so much older than my brother. I think by the time my brother was growing up in that same area, it was more diverse, but it was a small town. It was a very small, homogeneous Midwestern town, and I love it, and it's a place that we still think of as home. But it's funny, my name, my parents' name. I remember one time when we moved to a new house, and we had changed the address, and they had changed the address card, but we had accidentally put the wrong address down. Yet we still got our mail every day. And I was outside, and I was talking to the postman one day, and I said, "Thank you so much." And he looks at me, and goes, "You could just put Gupta down, and the mail pretty much give to you." There weren't too many of us. Was the point.
What's interesting about your book too, which is cool. I mean, it's going through it. It was primed to be a television show, and now it is.
Yeah.
But not just a show, dude. The guy who's made big shows.
Yeah, David E. Kelley, who's a terrific, he's a terrific television writer, and he's somebody he's not afraid to take on big issues and do scripted drama around it, and it's fantastic. I'll tell you the funny thing though, George, because I'm an avid reader. When you write a book, part of the excitement I think as a reader is that you leave it to the imagination of the reader to fill in the blanks. Yeah. What exactly does this guy look like? What is his sentiments towards certain things? When you do a television show, you're filling a lot of that in now for the viewer, and that took a little getting used to. These characters, they're like my children. I know what color socks they like, and then all of a sudden, you're going to have Alfred Molina play that person, or Ving Rhames, and it just it's an interesting.
What's it going to be called? It's not going to be called Monday Mornings. That's not TV. It's not TV friendly.
Monday Mornings. I told you why I called it that, but they said we have to call it something that doesn't have a day and a time associated with it, because you watch Monday Mornings on Thursday nights.
Right.
That's too confusing for the viewer, so they got to change the title. They're calling it Chelsea General, which is the name of the hospital there, the fiction hospital.
I'm assuming whenever you walk into an operating room, your plan is to make it as easy as possible for the patient. Waking up in the middle of surgery has got to be terrible if the anesthesia wears off. Is there anything more cruel and unusual than a patient lying on the table, waking up, and you're playing them the Gypsy Kings? Well, I heard
you're not a fan.
You did surgery to the Gypsy Kings?
I love the Gypsy Kings. Yeah, that's my.
You have a playlist.
I have 4 playlists actually. Yes, well, because neurosurgeons do brain surgery, a lot of brain surgery, and we also do a lot of spine surgery. So I have a brain playlist, and I have a spine playlist.
Amazing.
And then I have an opening, when I'm opening the beginning of the case playlist for the brain, opening for the spine, and then a closing playlist. Sometimes we'll turn the music off in the middle of the case, for getting down to the nitty gritty. But yeah, Gypsy King's good opening music.
Okay.
But then I have, I love Red Hot Chili Peppers. I love, Coldplay. There's a lot of sort of medical themes.
I heard you had a Canadian one on there. I heard you had Finger 11 on your playlist.
Love Finger 11.
Yeah?
You're a fan? Yeah. Paralyzer. One of my...
Hey, well, hold on. I hope you have Paralyzer when you're not working on spines, right? I hope that's a headline. someone.
That's good.
You know? All right, let me rapid fire some anthropology questions towards you. How often do you have to diagnose people on the street or in parties?
I did it twice today. Yes. So in the airports is the most amazing thing. Like people, hey, and they don't realize that you don't know who they are.
Right.
This rash on my elbow, you know.
Have you ever seen something really serious and went, oh, you need to check that out?
It's amazing. I have, and people share the most intimate things with you, you know, and they, again, you don't know them, but it's gratifying. Yeah. Like you, they feel like they know you. So.
How old's your oldest daughter now?
She's about to be 7.
About to be 7.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward in hopefully 20 years from now, when they hit dating age, 20, 27, right?
About 30 years from now.
30 years from now. What is the ultimate deal breaker if he brings home a guy? What is the deal breaker? You're looking at him and going, he's leaving.
You know, look, I haven't set the bar too high necessarily myself, so it's going to be tough for me to. You know, we always had just a few basic rules. You know, you want to be a good person, you want to be a charitable person. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to hurt others. And I think as a parent, you want your daughters to be happy. And if I get the sense that somebody's making my daughter unhappy, and maybe she's even blinded to it, that might be a time that a father has to do his fatherly duty.
True.
Pull out the shotgun, which I will be buying, by the way.
Now that's an American. That's an American. What is the greatest Canadian contribution to medicine?
I think probably universal health care. I mean, I think that the idea that people can get health care and that they don't die of preventable diseases. I mean, look, I'm an American doctor, but I think we'll look back on, 30, 40 years from now on this chapter and say, so you did so many things right, yet people still died that didn't need to. Yeah. That was an embarrassing chapter. And so I think, you look at Tommy Douglas, you look at what, the average person has. They don't worry about going bankrupt. It's an incredible contribution.
What do you think with the shift towards President Obama, especially with what being called Obamacare? It's usually said with derision, and I'm not making a judgment either way on the plan, but just what's happening with the president there, because I know Hillary was trying to do this as well with some kind of health care plan.
Yeah, and I think her plan was in many ways in '94 more aggressive. It was a truly sort of universal health plan that had a single payer component to it. And I worked for the Clinton administration. I worked on health care. I wrote for The Economist for some time on these issues. And so much of it is that, look, I think that if you poll the average person, they'll say, I think universal health care is a good idea. People should have health care insurance. Now, whether it should be, a single payer, whether it should be government, those are worthy discussions to have. But I think what's happened now is you've created an employer-based health care system in the United States that in order to change it, it would be like trying to change the parts on a fast-moving train. And people just, they don't have the patience for it, and what happens during that whole transformation. So I think that drives a lot of the sentiment against it. Also, there is a continued distrust of big government, I think, much more so in the United States than a lot of other countries. And I think that drives it as well.
What's it like writing a speech for Hillary Clinton?
She speaks about 90 words a minute.
Yeah, she's not a lightweight, man. Smart.
Yeah, right. You don't want to get it wrong with her. She's an exacting boss. But I loved it. I learned a lot from her. But it's funny. I say the 90 words a minute thing because in the end, it's a process as well. The president spoke at 110 words a minute. Yep. She was 90 words a minute, so you had to time it out exactly.
Have you and Michael Moore made up yet?
It's funny, I think with things like that, and again, TV has a way of sensationalizing things. I think in the end, Michael Moore and I weren't actually saying things that were that different. I think that, what we both believed in, and what I've told you is I think, the idea that people don't have health care insurance is wrong. It's an abomination. But I think how you get there exactly, in a pragmatic way. Forget about, the philosophy, forget about, revisiting history. Right now, you got people out there in need. Yeah. They need health care. They're going bankrupt without it. They're sick. Their kids can't get health care. We've got to address the problem. So, I'm about real solutions.
And you think it's, we're getting there?
I think what the Affordable Care Act has done is probably over the next couple of years will insure 30 million more people if it stays in place. It's obviously a big question mark right now. So it's getting there. But everyone still doesn't have it. And, you really feel, I do a lot of my work at a county hospital, and you feel for people who every day they wake up in the morning not thinking about how they're going to make the world better, or how they're going to, help their families or help themselves. They're thinking about whether they can get through the day because of a health care problem.
Got to check out the book here. It's called Monday Mornings. It's his debut novel. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, everybody, will be right back.